exactly one of the use cases we see. It's still, I think this is still early on, and we need to do a better job at educating developers.
It's been 2 weeks. Come on. That's infinity. Time has passed.
One of the use cases for code, like running AI generated code, is to improve reasoning.
Hello, AI tinkerers, and welcome here to One Shot. This is our global stage where passionate AI practitioners, software engineers, and tech entrepreneurs come together to share their projects and to deep dive into their code and implementation so that you can apply their learnings and discoveries and breakthroughs to your own projects. So today we're honored to have Vasek, the founder and CEO of a very cool company called E2B, which is truly laying the groundwork for the emergence of agentic systems via a puzzle piece that I think was missing until they brought it around. And we're going to jump right in. But first of all, welcome, Vasek.
Hey, nice to be here. Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming up for the interview and for the hackathon we're doing this weekend.
Yeah.
And I met some of your team in Paris and in Prague, which is awesome. And I've been following you for a long time on Twitter. So great stuff. Tell me, what is E2B for those who don't know?
So E2B is a dev tool that makes it easy to run AI-generated code in the cloud securely. That's like the simplest elevator pitch we give people, and then we dive into more detail based on the audience.
Mm-hmm. And it's open source?
It's open source. Everything's fully open source.
Everything is open source.
Like literally everything is open source.
When you say running safely, like how are you running that? Like you pipe open source talks to your cloud, or is that piece also open source if I wanted to run it?
So there's an infrastructure part of our mm-hmm. product, which is all about the security. We use something called sandbox. We call it sandbox. This is like a virtual machine, mm-hmm. Micro virtual machine, mm-hmm. in which we run the AI generated code. Mm-hmm. And that's part of our infra repository. And then we also have SDKs and mm-hmm. CLI mm-hmm. on top of that, mm-hmm. which make it easy to start a sandbox, control a sandbox, mm-hmm. send the code into the sandbox, connect it to the LLM, to your agent, mm-hmm. and generally cool. Control everything.
Let's jump in and see it.
Yeah. So. First, like a quick overview of the repositories we have in our on our GitHub. So there's an infra repository, which is all about the sandboxes, orchestration of these sandboxes, how we are placing that on the nodes on the servers. And there are two important repositories. One is E2B and one is Code Interpreter. Mm-hmm. So first, like a little bit background about how the sandbox works. When you create a sandbox with a single line of code. So let me show that actually. You create a sandbox. We have JavaScript and Python SDK. Mm-hmm. And once you create a sandbox, you basically have a small computer mm-hmm. In a cloud for your LM, for your agent. And you can do that for every user session. So we have users like running hundreds of thousands of user sessions, mm-hmm. and every single user session has its own sandbox.
Mm-hmm. So this would be like, what's the canonical use case here? Is it like, I want to build basically a code interpreter type of functionality, some kind of dynamic UI or graphing, charting analysis. I want to actually build that into like maybe my customer support tool or whatever internal tool or external tool. And to do that, to run that code safely, you've made it easy for me to like do all the LLM stuff I'm familiar with, but also like provision, run, and return results from the actual code that was generated by the LLM. So
yes. So there are a couple of use cases, and like some of them are very straightforward in mm-hmm. a sense. It's like really code interpreting, and that's about like you ask LM to generate some kind of code. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes it's about data analysis, data visualization. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of examples in our cookbook about that with different LLMs. Mm-hmm. So okay. let me open some of them. So there's a Claude Code Interpreter that we built some time ago. You can basically get a functionality that you have with GPT-4 mm-hmm. and other models from OpenAI, but we give you the ability to create and customize your code interpreting and code interpreter environment, and deploy it on your infrastructure.
Okay. Do you want to show us? Just go ahead and show us one of the full running apps that somebody uses all the pieces of it.
So I mean, I can go to Perplexity, for example, which is our customer, and this is.
So yeah, and that's a whole topic of. I'm so curious how that relationship came about and how many sessions you're doing, if you can share. But that seems like a high scale use case of your technology as well.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, pull up Perplexity and show us how it works, and then maybe you can unpack, as a developer, what's going under the hood when we see the visuals that you demo.
So when you are using Perplexity and you are a pro user, you enable the pro mode, you can start asking more programming questions. So for example, visualize a data set of how price of gold has changed.
Oh wow. So Perplexity is going to bring in the data sets, not just the results and the citations like you see in the consumer product. They're going to actually follow your instructions and bring data in that's going to feed to your VM session?
So this is on Perplexity.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, it's actually using programming now. So it collected data from the internet, and now it's running a tool, which is programming, and it took all the data that it found, and it now visualizing it.
Okay,
and this is like this chart here. At the moment, it's not interactive, but we are actually working on that to make it better. This is based on the data that Perplexity found on the internet. And this ran through code interpreter. So what Perplexity did, it took the data, took my query, converted it to code, and ran that code. And the code was running on top of E2B.
Okay, so if I was building that same kind of functionality in my app, right? Tell me what the interfaces are with your sort of API or toolkit, and then where you're taking over and running code and who's calling the LLM? Am I calling that, or have you wrapped that? Like how does that work?
Our philosophy is essentially that we want to be the boring code execution layer for LLMs. We don't want to be wrapping LLM for you or being like too opinionated about how an agentic system you should be building. Really, I like to describe that we are like boring code execution layer, so you can focus on the nice, sexy part of your AI app. And so that means we work with any LLM, and there are different methods of how you can use E2B with different LLM.
Okay.
Typically, what you can do, and the more straightforward use case is, if the LLM supports tool use, you can expose something like run Python tool, and then you have implementation of that tool through our SDK.
Would you just show me that? Do you have some code right now that would show us, like, there's the one-line setup kind of bringing in your library. There's the whatever's going to say the tool to generate Python, and then where's the flow that's going to pass off to the LLM, and where's it going to execute in your sandbox? Just the high level kind of flow.
So I have a Claude example here, and it's a similar type of an example. We are like essentially trying to get some visualization, some chart out of the LLM with code interpreting, and you start with install Anthropic SDK, install E2B Code Interpreter SDK. We have specific SDK just for code interpreting use case because it's so frequent. And what you do is that you define your prompt, everything as usual. You also define your tools, and this is where it gets where we want to be like less opinionated, and we want to just give you like we want to inspire you. We want to inspire developers. We want to show you like one of the ways how you can do it, but ultimately it's all about your use case.
Got it.
So here we have a simple tool called execute Python, which just describes how it works for LLM, and it says, hey, you can send the Python code into this tool, and that Python code will run in a Jupyter-like environment, like a Jupyter server, Jupyter notebook environment. And what you will get back is standard output, error output, display data, any error.
What if my application wanted to use third-party tools, like a FFmpeg, and do some video transcoding, or who knows what I might do? Can you handle something that beefy? And how do I get those tools to be accessible by the sandbox, or is that even possible?
Yeah, totally. So there are two ways how to do that. We have by default you get us one like default sandbox, right? That we have prepared for you, which is very general machine, essentially, virtual machine in the cloud, but you can customize it beforehand.
So you get out of the box kind of maybe what OpenAI has in their ChatGPT.
That's exactly for like the code interpreter use case.
Yeah.
So we built that SDK, that code interpreter SDK, on top of our sandbox, which is very general, and there we installed a bunch of libraries that we expect for you to use for data visualization, analysis, like business intelligence
And
stuff.
if I wanted to lock that sandbox down for my enterprise app and not have it access the internet or something, I could do all that. It's just a Linux box, or what is it?
It's essentially a Ubuntu machine. So we have users that have a sandbox that can access internet for essential enterprise reasons, security reasons. It's not like a public. There's not a public way for you to do it through our SDK. But if you are a savvy engineer and you know what to do in your Ubuntu
Savvy engineer means you DM Vasek and ask for help.
that's exactly what happened. Like we have customers like just ping us on Slack, hey, like can we disable internet access? Just run like these 2 commands in your
Okay, so it sounds like these VMs can be spun up and you can configure them for your use case and give them new tools and define those tools and use that with LLM tools. And how fast can they be spun up? And like you said, per user session, Perplexity is pretty high volume. How do you think about performance, I guess?
So it's not just like nice to have. Speed is not nice to have. Speed is not only a feature, it's a necessity. So
well, Perplexity is known for speed. I mean, I think they wouldn't. I think it's a good validation.
that was like one of the first questions that Perplexity had on for us, and it was how quickly you can spin up these sandboxes. The answer is currently it takes about 150 milliseconds.
Okay.
So we want to go lower. We will get lower. We have a bunch of things we know that aren't optimized yet, but most like the starting the sandbox itself takes about 20 milliseconds, and rest of that we have some networking setup that isn't optimized yet. Yeah, so like we know what to do basically, and essentially we want to get like under 100 milliseconds for like, as a next step, but 150 has been good so far.
Okay. Turning to just for a second to like use cases again. So we talked about Perplexity. We saw how they're using it, analysis and visualization. Generative UI, agentic workflows. I hinted at the beginning. Internal tools is something I want to use it for. But what are some of the buckets that you see for the app? You say you're not opinionated, but what are the uses, the common uses that you're seeing?
Yeah. So there are like 6 use cases that we are seeing at the moment. Some of them are, and it essentially goes on like if you imagine like a spectrum. From on the left is production, used by users every day, to more experimental, and like aiming more where the ball will go. It starts with business data analysis with AI. Business data visualization, that's basically what we were doing here, I just showed. Then it goes into more like experimental use cases, and one of them is generative UI, which I think has gotten much better with the new Sonnet model, especially if you can have some guardrails in place. For example, like you will be building internal apps with specific framework that will be connected to your specific database, so you can describe how your schema looks like.
Yeah.
And so just like make sure that you don't leave everything on the LLM to figure out, and just like explain the context.
Do you have a good example of a kind of disposable user interface?
Yeah, so I have, and this is an open source project that we built to showcase like how you can build something like your own artifacts. Like Anthropic has artifacts product.
Yeah, and I think Misha in Paris, AI Tinkers demoed this on stage. It was great. Very cool to see. Yeah,
Misha is actually the one who built most of this. So he has owned the whole project. He did a really, really great job. And so first, let me step back. It's all open source.
Yeah.
Right. So you can check out the code.
What is it built in? Like if I'm integrating that into my application, I want to have this kind of functionality. What would I be integrating?
It's a Next.js app on the front end. And then it's obviously using our sandbox, or it's using E2B. Yeah. And then we have a bunch of, it's using AI SDK and from Vercel, and bunch of LLM providers, LLM models that is connected to it.
Show us how it works.
Yeah. So you go to artifacts.e2b.dev, you sign up. We are currently taking all the costs on us. And there you can pick from a bunch of different models. Still, Claude is probably the best one. The Sonnet model, the new Sonnet model, is still really one of the best one and fastest one for generating full apps. My favorite use case is building Streamlit apps for internal productivity, like for a company. But every like persona that you can pick here is a custom sandbox, custom E2B sandbox, and you can create your own. So this is like.
So is it like Artifacts where I would generate a Streamlit app and then basically I have to copy it out and deploy it on my own if I want to keep that same app around for a while?
Yeah.
Or integrate it into my database and backend.
Exactly. So this is like to give you an inspiration of what you can do. So sometimes like what happens that people think this is our product. We still struggle a little bit sometimes explaining that this is actually not a product, like we are the infrastructure running this. So we are doing a few changes for the next iteration of this app.
I had the opposite question. I know that your product is not this, but I thought, are you going to make this a product?
No. So there are great products like V0 and a lot of new startups are building something like this. For us, this is technical marketing, technical
It's a
content.
great demonstration. Well, so show it to us.
So let's build a Streamlit app. I actually have a prompt here, and the idea is that I ask Sonnet to come up with like fictional data set of 15 Airbnbs, and I want it to plot on a map of Seattle. So it's starting generating the code now. You see, it's very similar to artifacts from Anthropic, which was the goal here. We wanted to show people how they can build something like this. And now what you see on the right, this is an app running inside our sandbox. The sandbox like got spawned ad hoc on spot, like in 150 milliseconds. And this is like Streamlit app running inside the sandbox. You can so you have the interactive map here, as exactly basically what I asked for. Great for internal use cases if you have like a database. The next step for us would be allowing people to connect their data to something like this to show how they can combine building like generative UI for their internal like apps and data.
Can we talk about that for a second? You know, I think about generative, I mean, I guess any code that you generate that you run in theory could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because it could hallucinate that one time or be hacked. So you need to run it. But any useful app is going to need lots and lots of context, and it needs actions and tools. And you know, if I'm building that within the context of my product or company, it's my tools and my actions, some of which are delete something or charge a customer a credit card. So how do I think about building a system using E2B and then also kind of within the bounds of what secure means to me, but also powerful? Does that make sense? You know, I'm going to have your sandboxes ultimately calling into my database or my APIs internally. Is that my responsibility in your architecture, I guess?
At the moment, it would fall on you. So definitely you need to have like a right permissions in place. I would recommend maybe have a copy of the database to run test that code on first, so you don't corrupt your critical data.
Is there a best practice for how to design such a system, an agentic system that's going to have maybe Copilot oriented or maybe humans in the loop, but I'm going to be generating and running code all day long, generative?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we have anything like that yet.
I don't think anyone has anything like that yet. Okay.
But we are thinking very actively about this. So this whole category like is basically kind of like observability, but it's a different observability than what people usually know when it comes to LLMs and agents. When you talk about LLM observability at the moment or agent observability, most of it is what prompt goes to an LLM, how much token you consume, how much it costs for you, are the prompts harmful? All of that is important, right? Like you need that. But when we are talking about observability, it's different. It's what the agent, what's your AI app is doing inside the sandbox. And it exactly goes into your question about security for the database. Like we are essentially going towards a system where we will be able to tell you, hey, your agent has produced a code that is trying to access your database, and that database access is basically write access. Do you want to continue or not? And we will expose all of this through our SDK and through callbacks, through webhooks.
It sort of reminds me of the iOS or ecosystem, where as a you can build apps, but they're going to stop and ask the user for permission.
Exactly. So imagine like future use cases, you ask an agent to do something with your financials. You probably don't want it to, or developer doesn't want to just like have their agent going into their user's bank account without users knowing. You want to know about what's happening. So you need to have like opt-in, double opt-in. And sometimes it may take like a day to get that opt-in from a user.
What are some of the other tools in the ecosystem where you're butting up against things all the time, I'm sure, with your customers and early users? Like when you said a minute ago about like you might have a copy of your database, I thought about Neon database, and they've got this, I think, almost like versionings of a database.
Yeah.
One click and you can like essentially like almost like hitting a branch on GitHub. You can like branch your entire data set, and that seems perfect for agentic. Whoops, I screwed it up, or maybe the observability layer says you screwed it up, but you can roll back. Have you come across? Is that an interesting one? What other interesting ones are out there that should be on people's radar?
So it's funny that you asked that, because I spoke a few days ago with Neon, and we basically were brainstorming some of the agentic use cases. We agreed that a combination of having a sandbox and a branch for database of your database, like it's a perfect fit. You want copy of the data so to make sure like nothing gets corrupted or just like anything, nothing harmful happens. On top of that, like, we are also going to, in the next couple of months, have some kind of like checkpoint system in a place. So something similar to branching, essentially like forking a sandbox, being able to have multiple copies of the same sandbox, like running at the same time. Very useful for if you have multiple agents running, trying to complete the same task, but they take different approaches. And
what are some of the, I know you probably have to be Switzerland here, but like what are some of the, in terms of an application developer coming out of agentic workflows, what are some of the tools that you see people using, and how do they integrate in with your thing? I'm talking about like, the agentic workflow tools that are out there, both open and closed. I
wouldn't underestimate how powerful it is. Go just like vanilla with LLM providers SDKs
and write your own code. I'm embarrassed because that's literally what I do. All of my Gen A, I look at the toolkits and I get inspired by, they're like educating me what's possible. But when I get down to my terminal, between Claude and my existing code base and how I need to integrate in, I always find myself just writing it from scratch. I don't know why.
I think that's a very legit start, right? Like, I don't think like you might find out that you don't need any framework, but you might find out that you need something more complex. And then in that moment, it's a good idea to start looking for something that might save your time.
Now I know the reasoning stuff that's come out, the one is very new, but have you seen any customers that have had good positive impact with agentic apps? Are people excited about it? Are you surprised by it? Like, it seems like a good fit for, essentially if you're going to generate code and run it, you might be better at reasoning and get more benefit, right?
That's exactly one of the use cases we see. It's still, I think this is still early on, and we need to do a better job at educating developers.
It's been 2 weeks. Come on. That's infinity time has passed.
One of the use cases for code, like running AI generated code, is to improve reasoning. Right, like the most simplest use case is like when we go back to Perplexity. Sure. I don't think if they have changed it, but like how many R's is in a strawberry? Yes, you can get this done with a better model. You can also get this done with programming. I don't know if it's gonna use programming right now. It didn't. Like it searched the internet.
Wait, so if it had used programming, it would have used E2B?
Yeah, it would just write simple Python code snippet that basically counts hours in a letter. Sorry,
cool.
in a word.
Cool.
So I didn't decide to use it here, but like there was this whole hype around Strawberry model coming up, and on Twitter, people were like hyping people that Perplexity already has it. But actually what it was doing is using code interpreter to count the hours, which was pretty funny.
Before we kind of move towards wrapping up here, I'd love to ask you about just some of the architecture of the thing. Like you did mention the biggest components in there. I'm curious about it sounds like it's very ephemeral, like generate the code, run it, repeat that loop. And we showed the artifact clone to be, maybe do that a few times and then paste the app out into an app that you host somewhere else, right? But do you plan, or do you support now the idea of kind of like, if I'm an application developer and I run code, I can kind of freeze that and reuse it? Because it seems like there would be real benefits there.
We don't have that yet, or now, but like the political answer is like we are thinking about it.
I mean, I imagine a world where like I write code today by like essentially thinking about my feature spec and pulling it out, and then I go to Claude, and then I integrate that code into my project. And I view a future world where it's that same workflow, except I don't paste in and paste out. I use the SDK that you got.
Yeah.
But I also kind of like say, hey, keep it around, or generate this, validate it for me, and keep it around if it validated.
Yeah.
And then my new tool is now in production and it's running. And if I'm going to modify the features, I would just go back to my spec, and then it would magically update itself and validate again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, like if you have full aging system generating the code, why shouldn't the last step be also kind of automated? So it's something that we think makes a lot of sense to make it easy for developers at some point. And especially, so this is very interesting because this is where it gets, like, one of our pitches is that we are building a runtime for AI agent. And this is where it's more about like thinking into the future, that you don't know beforehand how that code will look like. You don't know beforehand what the agent will do. So and you need to check everything as it happening. How do you make easy for the agent to like install libraries quickly? How do you make them accessible in the future when the code has been already generated? So all these questions are very, very adjacent to what you just asked, and essentially like creating a runtime that makes it easy to not only run the code but like deploy the code.
Let me do some rapid fire questions. So first is, what is the most boring but high volume use case you've seen?
Data visualization, or just like talk to your spreadsheet.
Okay, what's the most creative, unexpected use case you've seen?
That's a good question. There are many of them.
What are some of the creative ones?
So the most exciting use cases are the agents that are not agents for developers, like not coding agents, but they are using code to complete tasks.
Like what?
Like I just spoke to a developer who's using code generation for lead enrichment.
Okay.
So you have all this infrastructure in the world from different services, and the best way to connect them, like one of the best ways, is just like use their API. Right. Use the
and
existing
doing that
API.
On the fly.
And doing that on the fly, right? Like and just run that. And so that's why we are very, very bullish on agents using code to complete not just like coding tasks for developers, but any task.
Okay. Another quick question. You said what the components were, and it's open source. The sandbox piece of it. In other words, once I've used your API, and of course I can use your cloud service to run and deploy. I probably will do that. But if I wanted to, is that piece also open source? Like, could I literally do that in a private cloud, enterprise, air-gapped like environment?
You can do that. It's not easy at the moment.
Sure.
We will do a better job of it.
Okay.
We have a few customers that are.
So you're truly end-to-end open source committed to that.
Yeah, the idea is that like if you are a big enough company, you will have requirements that to run this inside your VPC.
What's the big vision right now for E2B? Like, what do we see in the next 6 months?
we want to be the best place to run AI-generated code, and then the next step is to deploy AI-generated code, and that's the only focus for us. Like we don't want to do too many things at once. We want to do more things in the future, but for now, like if you think about running AI-generated code, it should be E2B that what you are thinking of. We need to be that default choice, and also, like dedicate like 20% of our roadmap of our thinking about how we can inspire developers, of what they can build, like be the thought leadership almost into like what are the new interesting ways how you can use code execution with LLMs to build completely new applications. And I think this is super important in this space where you kind of like need to stay thinking about what's going to come next in the next 6 months, because once it comes, you need to be there. You need to basically say, hey, and we have all these examples already here, and this is how you can use it to build this new exciting stuff.
Cool. How did you first hear about AI Tinkerers, and what was your first?
I think it was an event that I saw on Twitter or X in London, maybe. That was the first event I saw. And then...
And you guys you were based in Prague, or distributed, or?
So right now we are based in San Francisco. We are getting everyone to San Francisco in person. Originally we are from, the core team is from Prague, from the Czech Republic.
And you all met, like I heard the story from Teresa in Prague about meeting at university. Computer science and math geeks, basically. You didn't know each other and somehow you came together. How did that happen?
So my co-founder and I, it goes way back. Like we have known each other since high school, over 12 years. Started building video games together in high school. Then our first two employees, like our founding engineer and founding DevRel, was Teresa and Jakub. And they both, funnily enough, studied at the same university, but they both studied math. Thomas, my co-founder, and I, we were studying computer science. And we didn't know about each other. But after we raised our pre-seed round last year, we actually got connected through one of our investors. And then we pretty much very quickly clicked. And it was clear that they are great people, very hardworking, and I think they are really good startup fit.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today and deep diving into how to use it and what's there, the architecture, some of the use cases. It's fascinating stuff. It's obviously, I think, kind of like I like how well defined and how kind of like focused you guys are on a piece that feels like very foundational and enabling for Agentic, which is clearly you were ahead of the curve to have thought of that in the first place over a year ago and done a great job. And Perplexity is an incredible momentum. So great job with that.
Yeah, thanks. We are very excited about Perplexity, obviously. And yeah, thank you for having me here. It was fun chat. And AI Tinkerers, I want to give a huge shout out to what you are building in the community around AI Tinkerers. I think it's really special because essentially every single event that you guys host, it's legit. It's like legit hackers coming to the event and building stuff, which I don't think is common with a lot of other events.
Thank you very much. Yeah, active builders.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
AI enthusiasts, AI tinkerers.
AI tinkerers, exactly.
All right, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.